I remember like trying to hide parental advisory stickers on CDs and tapes
Oh,
with my
sure.
thumb so I could convince my mom that it's okay for a 10-year-old to have like The Chronic by Dr. Dre. Like things like that.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much again for doing this. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Cool. Where were you born and raised in Jersey?
I was. I grew up in Sayreville. That was kind of where I was in my childhood, and then went to school, moved up north right outside of New York City. But I've been in Jersey my whole life, pretty much.
Right on. What was it like growing up there?
It's cool. It was I was lucky when I was younger. We're near a lot of what happened to be in the area, Central Jersey, where a lot of venues were.
Mhm.
So in high school and stuff, I got to see, I was exposed to a lot of touring and a lot of music and stuff. New Jersey 20 years ago used to be like a more popular spot for stops for metal and hardcore tours than it is today. So I was kind of spoiled as a kid because we got a lot of really cool shows and tours, and it kind of brought me into that world at a young age.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a lot of rad bands from Jersey as well. I mean, there's a big scene there for a while. I don't know if
Yeah,
there still is, but
there definitely still is. I feel like, I don't know if it's nostalgia or not, but when I was a kid, there was like, yeah, I mean, it was awesome. On any given weekend, you could see there was always an awesome show. And the Jersey scene with like Dillinger and God Forbid and the stuff
Mhm.
from New York and the New York hardcore scene that like worked its way down here to play every weekend. We got like a really cool taste of the identity of all the New Jersey bands, plus everything from New York, plus a lot of bands would come up from the South to do these like weekend warrior kind of mini tours.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I mean, there'd be Lamb of God would be here frequently as like a lot of the Virginia stuff made its way up. It was like the perfect stop in between Philly and New York. So
Uh-huh.
like we get lucked out and always caught like a cool weekend show here. Yeah, it was a nice area to grow up and see all that stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, because you are in between, like you just said, Philly, and you're kind of there between Philly and New York, and bands would stop there. See, I'm from San Diego, and we'd either get a lot of bands coming through there, or we would get totally screwed, and an artist would do like 2 nights in LA, or a night in LA and a night in Anaheim, and like wouldn't make it all the way down to San Diego. Because you guys sounds like you were kind of in the middle there, so people, would stop off and play.
Yeah, it was great. And it's kind of sad now because I see less stores hitting New Jersey. There's definitely, unfortunately, there's been a venue shortage for like the mid cap size rooms over the past few years. But
I'm sure even worse now with COVID, I would imagine.
yeah, there's just not a lot of like, if you do 500 to 1,000 kids a night, there's like not a ton of places you can really play here.
Mhm.
Um, so over the years, the frequency which bands pop through has kind of diminished a bit. But
Okay.
yeah, I think we still have Starland, which is a really cool venue, and
Mhm.
some of the bigger tours go there. Asbury still has a lot of spots, but it's yeah, I'd love to see another one up here, so I don't have to drive far away to shows anymore.
Sure. Well, how did you get into music? Are your parents musical? Do you have siblings that are into music at all? Or
Yeah, I found music like really, really young. I had already started developing my musical tastes that were
okay.
very far away from my parents, which is funny. They they listened to the softest rock. They were not really big classic rock upbringings there either. So it was a lot of like Neil Diamond and Rod
Mhm.
Stewart, Elton John, like great songs and stuff, but it was all very gentle. And then as a kid, I was exposed, growing up with MTV, like West Coast hip hop and grunge and all of that stuff, and through the beginning of the '90s, where I'm like, this stuff is like terrifying and exciting and dark and scary. So I gravitated to a lot of that stuff as a kid. I remember like trying to hide parental advisory stickers on CDs and tapes
Oh,
with my
sure.
thumb so I could convince my mom that it's okay for a 10-year-old to have like The Chronic by Dr. Dre. Like things like that. So like I kind of jumped into the wild stuff pretty early in life, I guess.
Mhm.
And then got into metal and found Metallica and Pantera and Slayer and all that stuff, and you know at 14 or 15 went to like one of my first hardcore shows and kind of fell in love with the energy of that world. And then I was just head first into that from then, you know.
What was that first hardcore show? Do you remember?
First one I went to would have probably been an E-Town Concrete show. I don't know if you know who that is, but that's a Jersey staple back in the day. It's the jewel of New Jersey if you're a hardcore kid here.
Oh, that's awesome.
But they're that probably would have been the first show I went to. I'd never really seen anything like that. I don't even know if my 14-year-old mind was prepared for that, you know. But yeah. And then there was a lot of that I saw, you know, a lot of stuff that there were a lot of really great mixed bill shows around here where you could see stuff like a band like Thursday and a band like Hatebreed playing together.
Oh, rad. Yeah.
So there was like this 2-3 year period there where I was exposed to all different kinds of music, all the subgenres, some really great venues that I was able to like kind of take it all in, you know. So through high school, I was lucky to kind of see all these different bands with different influences and kind of develop my taste from going to all these shows around here.
You talked about you being 14 when you saw that first hardcore show. Had you been to shows prior to that? And like,
only like
had you ever seen
just like bigger concerts, you know, stuff I would go with my parents or like, at that point I hadn't really been to a lot of like smaller scale shows. It's only been maybe 1 or 2 larger concerts.
Okay. So that must have been a huge difference, I would imagine.
Yeah, it was that completely different world. And it was exciting, really exciting at the time, for sure.
How did you get, did you have any friends or anything that were like, yo, we need to go see this band? Like, how did that whole conversation and trip end up happening?
Yeah, I had a job at a supermarket and I met a bunch of kids there who were like into that world. So I went to a different high school than a lot of the kids in my neighborhood. It was just like a border territory issue.
Oh, right.
So, where I worked and where I hung out and where I actually lived was like pretty far away from all the people I went to school with. So I had this like group of friends near where I lived that went to a different high school that were a part of the scene and were in with like these older kids that were showing them bands. So I would go to work and talk to these guys and hang out. I would find out about all these bands and all this stuff. And we wound up actually starting a band together. That was like my first band. That threw me like right into that world because it was a way to like, oh, this is cool. I can like hang out with all these guys. We could play shows with all these like bigger bands that I keep hearing about, we keep listening to. So it was like this supermarket job that I took was like my entry point to finding all this stuff.
That's amazing. What did you play an instrument at that time?
I started learning guitar, probably around the time I discovered like grunge and, you know, listening to Soundgarden and Nirvana records and stuff. I'm like, oh, I think I could play some of this stuff. It doesn't seem too hard. So I was like, you know, learning Nirvana riffs and Metallica riffs and stuff like that. And I didn't know how to write a song or anything. I was just like having fun, messing around with a guitar. And then I was like, oh, I'll try to do a band. It'll force me to like actually come up with stuff and be creative. And then I took some lessons once I was like, all right, I have to be better than what I am now. Like I'm, you know, watching older bands play that are clearly better than me and realizing like, oh, I probably need to put a little work into this if I want to make anything decent. So took lessons through high school and then kind of self-taught myself whatever I needed after that. I'm definitely not a virtuoso guitar player, but I always just want to learn the things that I think I'm going to need to use for the type of music I want to play. So over the years, that's sort of where that's, you know, led me. And then becoming a record producer, just picking up on a few other things, could play piano a tiny bit, but nothing. It's always just like, I get the tools I need to get stuff done, you know?
I mean, it seems like the genre that you're in with hardcore and metal and everything, like obviously the guitar playing is unreal, like how good some of these guys are. Was that something that was hard to kind of like, if you have a guitar teacher, you're like, I want to learn how to play, you know, this Hatebreed song, or was it like them teaching you scales? Like, how do you translate like a guitar setting like that?
I think nowadays there are great resources available. And because thanks to the internet, you can kind of more directly learn from the people that you're inspired by and look up to. there's a lot of guitar players now that have their own recording classes or lessons online. You can book lessons with your favorite drummers. You can, like this accessibility to actually learn from the artists you enjoy is awesome. And there was none of this as a kid.
Right. That's what I was gonna say. That wasn't around.
No, not at all. I had a guitar teacher who would show me Eric Clapton scales and things like that, and little blues and rock licks, which is cool. But like I had to figure out and apply that stuff to make my own music. And when I'm talking about metal and hardcore and stuff, like it wasn't like I didn't have a buddy or a teacher or anyone who really like set me down and said, okay, here's how you do the things you're looking to do. So that's what I mean. I kind of just self-taught and tried to figure out what I needed to be able to execute the stuff I wanted to. For sure.
And you said you're in a band. Was that in high school, the first band you were in?
That was, yeah. And then like since then, it had I've had incarnations of various bands through high school and college. And then sort of towards the end of sort of when I started producing records is when I finally started a band where I was like, oh, this might be like a kind of a more permanent thing and might stick and things like that. So it took me a while. I felt like it was never really going to be a thing for me. Even when I had first started making records and stuff, I never really looked at doing a band as anything more than just like friends having fun. I just never thought I would get it. And then, we kind of lucked out and got a lineup that was good. And people started to actually like the band. It started to get like touring opportunities. And then it became like, hey, maybe this could be like a band for a while, And I think it was really the first band I was in where I thought, we can do this,
That was Fit for an Autopsy?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm curious to know, like, were you going to college for music production or anything like that, or a totally different realm?
I was going to college for biomedical engineering, which is not has nothing to do with music. Yeah, I mean that's my whole life. I always just looked at music as a hobby. It was never a job. I didn't see like a career path for me there, and I did pretty good in school. Everyone thought I was going to be a doctor, or was just following this like course of like, all right, I'm interested in science. I like this stuff. And I was going to school, taking pre-med classes, like completely different environment, different world. I was still going to shows. I was booking shows in New Jersey. I tried to start a record label for fun. I was playing in bands, like still super involved in that world, but I wasn't trying to do it for a living because it just I just didn't know how to, and then I did get an opportunity to do some like intern stuff at a studio. I met Machine, the record producer, through I was taking a music class for fun in college as like an elective, and the guy shared a building with Machine in his studio. That's where I would go to take classes, and he knew I liked metal and was into some of the records Machine was making. So when Machine was looking for an intern, he's like, hey, you like the stuff this guy does. He needs somebody at the studio. You're doing pretty good in this class. Like, do you want to maybe talk to him? And that was sort of my entry point. So when I started working in a studio, it was still for fun. Like I still didn't even see it. And then like a couple weeks in there and I was like, okay, this is what I'm doing now. So I wound up, I think I dropped out of school with 5 credits left or something like that. Like I was almost done with school. It was so late into this process where I finally had figured out what I wanted to do with my life. And I started to spend more time there. I got an offer to engineer on a major label record, but it was like, you got to be here every day. So now it's like, go to class or do this, I was like, well, I could always go back to school if I change my mind. Fuck it. So I wound up leaving school and just taking a full-time job there and just kind of never looked back.
Wow. Yeah, because Machine produced like Lamb of God. I mean, speaking of a band that you've already referenced. As a kid, at that point, he had made a ton of records I was into, like Every Time I Die and Lamb of God. That Clutch record he did was awesome. Vision of Disorder. Like he was in the mix on so much stuff that I was like, was like half starstruck by. And I was like, these are some of my favorite bands. I get a chance to work with them. I can learn about how it's done. So I saw it as like, if I was ever gonna have an opportunity to get into this world, here it is, What was that conversation like with your family? Like, hey, I'm gonna stop going to med school and I'm gonna be a record producer.
They didn't really understand it, which I don't blame them for, because it was such a out of left field kind of drastic switch, you know. And it was met with some resistance. I think, you know, my mom's always been supportive of whatever I want to do with my life, but it definitely took a second for them to get it. You know, I had like a rough year there where they were just kind of not mad but disappointed, you know, that like motherly guilt that they lay into you with. Like I had some of that. I think once they realized that I was like able to do it and be independent and not be a burden to them, they were like, all right, whatever, you know. And over the years, like now she's really happy for where I am and stuff. So we're all good now. It just took a minute.
Sure. No, it's funny. I think we're similar in age. And it was like, I went into radio and like, I was going to college and thinking I was doing something. And then I didn't, I went this route. My parents, they're probably around the same age as yours. And they're like, what is this? Like, how are you going to make any money? Like there's not the cookie cutter. Like, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to become a doctor and then I'm going to make this much money. It's like nowadays, like there's so many other ways about, you know, being creative and making money. And it's interesting how, you know, you have to kind of convince your family like, hey, I'm going to take this route.
Yeah. I mean, the main thing, I think it was because there wasn't job security, you know, so
of course,
like the worry, and I didn't even know if it was going to work. I wanted to give it a shot, but I was like, you know, I'm fortunate that it did work out, but it doesn't for a lot of people in the music industry, you know? So, and I think they had kind of realized that too. So they were, I guess, a little more worried that it was going to crash and burn one day, not even to my own doing, just because it's hard to make it in this world, you know?
Right. Of course.
So,
of course.
Yeah.
What was that first record you worked on, that major label record?
First record I worked on, I'd worked on a few there, just more as an assistant or stuff. And then as an assistant or kind of helping with some editing. And then I got hired to engineer an Armor for Sleep record.
Wow.
Yeah. And at the time, they were on Warner maybe, or Universal. And it was like a proper credit. And like we're a big, long record with a lot of work to put into it. So it was cool. I was excited for it. I was barely ready for it, but you know, credit to Machine. He definitely like threw me into the fire early, which I think helped fast track some of my career, because I walked into a session barely knowing what I was doing, just enough to get by, you know?
Right. Yeah. That must've been nerve wracking going into that. Like, okay, now I've got this major label putting money into this whole thing. I've got this established band going to show up here and record a record.
It was always nerve wracking, because I always felt like I was over my head, and I still do. Like it's such a subjective career, and it's hard to have it's such an evolving career, producing and engineering and stuff, where, you know, if you rewind time and look back what you did a few years earlier, you're like, oh, what the hell was I thinking? Like it's this thing that is constantly being improved on. Like I figured that out early too, where it's like the only way to get good at this is to do the work and the trial and error, learn from what you've done and stay actively doing it. So I realized there, like, I can pick up on stuff quick enough where, like, if there's an idea, if we're trying to create a sound, or if there's a certain type of task, like I can find a solution, get what I need to do done. So I was like, okay with thinking fast on my feet. And I've learned that, like, I'll never really know what a band wants, or if I'm doing it right, or if it's as good as it can be. It's just, you have to like keep pushing through that stuff. So I was definitely sweating certain tasks, but I was comfortable enough knowing, like, I'm going to figure something out. The band I was working with was cool. Machine's cool. Like, we'll figure it out, you know? And I would just be pivoting through these types of jobs, learning as I went, you know?
I mean, from a personal standpoint, if I was going to produce like a record for like Armor for Sleep, for example, like, were you ever in a situation where you're like, because as a producer, you also help kind of co-write some of the songs, right? Or steer songs in a certain direction?
Sure. I mean, it definitely depends on what the type of project is and stuff. I mean, that's at least that pressure was off me, because Machine was the producer. So he's working on the song.
Okay.
he's responsible for all this stuff. I'm just the guy who's got a track. So like the entry point to me producing records was not via machine. It was me on the side taking this like knowledge that I learned. And then I would grab like local bands and my friends and be like, hey, let's make a record. And I had developed my own sort of producing identity and songwriting identity in parallel to learning the skills at the studio.
Got it. Yeah. Because I would think that going out and saying like, oh, hey, like we should try this. That might be hard to do, like to voice your opinion to a band that's, you know, established on a major label. They're like, hey, like it'd be cool to do this. Like, was that ever a hurdle for you?
No, because I kind of got checked enough early on to know, like, if you're in a studio and you're hired to do a job, like, don't butt in. Like, there's general etiquette when you're working for somebody else for a project. It's like, that's your show. You steer the ship. I know I'm supposed to shut up, even if I have an opinion. You're not supposed to, you know. You only really do that like once or twice, and then somebody sits you down and goes, "You can't do that, man." So I've like taken, you know, I just knew my role, and it was easy, you know, because it's not my job, it's not my pressure. It's like, why create a problem? You know.
Right. Totally. And when does Fit for an Autopsy start? Is it around the same time, or had you been producing for a while?
Yeah, we the band had I was in another band with some of the original guys in Fit that had fizzled out right around the time I got the studio job. And then I was like, hey, I want to like do more music here. I've got all these tools now and stuff. So I had those dudes come up to the studio. I was like, let's just do another band. It'll be fun. And now I can do it. We have this cool studio now, and we can just make songs and put a MySpace demo out, you know. And it actually started as a hardcore band because that was like the bands I was playing in at the time and stuff. And the original Fit for an Autopsy songs sound like terror songs, you know. We just it didn't even have a name yet or anything. But then we crossed paths with our original singer at a show who we were a really big fan of. He came from other bands in the metal world. And he was looking into a band, and we're like, what if we were just a metal band? Like, this could be cool. Like, we really like that guy. And we're like, we basically built a band around our original singer. That turned out to be kind of what Fit for an Autopsy is today.
Oh wow, yeah, because you had what, a couple records with the original singer, and then
we did it. That first demo was like a trial. It was like, let me write some songs and see if this guy wants to be in our band. He's like, yeah, these are cool, let's do it. So there's this demo that came out that like in the MySpace days, and then we did 2 records with our original guy.
Okay, when did things start to pick up for the band?
When we had done our second record, which I guess was about like 2013, the first record was cool. It was like an intro to the band, and it was like we got a label that was pretty well respected at the time around here, Black Market Activities, which was the guy from the Red Chords label, which was a lot of the bands we really liked. It was like a really cool home for our first record, and it kind of introduced the band to people outside of just the local scene and stuff like that. We didn't do much on that record. You know, we played some shows, did like a little tour to the second record, Hellbound, is when like on a bigger, it kind of scaled up. More people were into the record, more bands found out about us, we had more opportunities. And I think that's the one with the band really started to tour full time. As like, okay, now we're a touring band, you know. I always attribute that record to being the one that like kind of put us on the map per se, you know.
Was it hard to tour and juggle like the band with producing?
It was impossible. Yeah, that's why I've subbed myself out of touring with the band years ago, because I realized like, yeah, I can't do both of these things, you know.
Sure.
Because we had done a tour or 2 on Hellbound, and then I was like playing some shows on tours, but then I had to go back to go to work and like getting fill-ins, but then like another fill-in for this day, and it became such a hassle that I was like, look, I want to be a part of this band. I like making the music and helping run the show and being the creative, you know, brain that kind of like this was like art to me, but I couldn't make it this job for me, you know? So I was like, let's just get another guy, make him a band member. You guys can tour as a 5-piece. And it's like, I'm not throwing a wrench into it anymore by like only being able to commit to certain things and not. Cause the way I definitely hit that fork in the road where it was like, I could be a record producer or I could be a band guy. Yeah, I couldn't do both, you know? But yeah, we figured it out. We got Tim in FIT, who's better than me at guitar by a lot, and tightened up the live show, and took a lot of the pressure out of having to deal with that. So now I just don't do the touring. But yeah, he's like a road dog and loves it. So it's like it was like the perfect relationship for all of us to make it work.
That's awesome. And was that a difficult decision to make? Or were you kind of set in the fact that you really enjoyed the producing?
It was obvious, but it was difficult because it was like, I never really had this opportunity. I finally do. It was just a lot of good at once. And some of it I had to choose what to do with myself, you know? I knew making records is for me. I knew that was like, I want to do this for the long haul, you know? Not that I don't want to do the band, but I was like, I love being a little part of so many projects. I feel like I'm in so many bands being a record producer. Like it's rewarding on a different kind of level for me. And it's like, this band was always just a creative outlet, and it's very fulfilling for me. But as living in it at the time, if I had to choose between the two, making records just makes so much more sense to me, you know? That was hard. Yeah, it was obvious but difficult, you know.
Okay. And were you writing, because I mean, obviously you guys have a ton of records out with FIT for an Autopsy, but were you writing those songs, and then like how would the dynamic work? Was it like, okay, I have all these song ideas, let's write them, let's put them down, and then you guys take it on the road and kind of push it, or how did that work?
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, they're definitely like, we're a team, you know, and we make decisions together, and we do stuff, you know, as a unit, which is good, because I think my band has valuable opinions, and I like including everybody in the process, so we're all stoked and on the same page. But yeah, I do kind of take the lead on a lot of the writing and creative stuff, visually too, like whatever's sort of more associated on the creative side with the band, I kind of taking the charge with, and I usually start most of the material. I usually come up with like more of the visual concepts and things like that, and then, you know, talk with those guys, see if there's anything else to add, take suggestions, and then yeah, once there's like kind of a finished product and it's go time, like they have their own, you know, they run the show on the road, and I kind of just stay out of their way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What was it? At what point was it that you could, you know, kind of come to your family and say, you know what, this record producing thing is happening. Like, this is like my full-time gig. Like, do you remember that moment?
I think it took I was like kind of struggling for a little bit off the bat there, because I wasn't really making a lot of money, and I was like, it was really hard to live for a year or two. I was like
grind,
still working another job because I didn't have full-time producing work, and like burning the candle at both ends, doing, you know, 8-10 hours at the studio, then trying to work on some of my own music, then going to do some like little shitty bartending job. Like there was a lot of it was just work. And then I think they were like, yeah, this is going to work. I don't think my parents saw this as a career, seeing how much work I was doing and still struggling. But I think once it got to the point where I was like, I just make records, I'm not bothering you for money, I pay my bills, like it's all fine. I think that helped. I also think getting married to a person with a more stable job was like, all right, whatever. So that probably didn't hurt the process either. But I think once they saw that I was just, my life had stability to it, they were just happy for me, you know.
Was there a particular record that kind of changed it for you as far as a producer?
I don't know if I can pin one. I mean, early on, yeah, the first, like, I had done some local bands in the area. I had like creatively, one that changed it for me was there's this band called The Banner from New Jersey.
Okay.
And I had scheduled a Banner record, and this was like right up until we were all good, right up until like the week before the studio, where the guitarist quit. And there was like this whole fallout. And I was like, at the point, this was like my first record with like Ferret. It was like one of my biggest records at that point that I had just gotten on my own as a producer. And I didn't want it to fall apart. So I was like, what if I wrote some stuff and see how it goes? So I still kept the sessions. And then I wound up writing the whole record with the singer and the drummer together. So it was like,
Wow.
that was the first time I really got thrown into like a songwriting. Okay, you're gonna write with a band, you know. And I loved it. It was so fun to make. It was so fun to take their ideas and interpret them and like kind of play the role. Like I liked their music too, and I kind of understood what they were trying to do with it. We had similar influences, so it was just this like really, really fulfilling creative process. When that was done, I was like, I want to do more of this. Like this was awesome, you know. And at that point, I'd never been in a scenario like that, so it sort of it kind of planted the seed in my head to be like, I think like co-writing and doing this kind of like really hands-on production work could be for me, you know. And that was really early on, you know. And it changed the way gave me some confidence early to be like, all right, so I can do this with other bands. So if they come in and their music sucks, I'm gonna make countertrack be good, you know. And it helped, you know. I think after that record, I did start to dig in more with bands, and then some of those records started to hit more, and it kind of it snowballed from that.
Yeah, I mean, once you get kind of some credits under your belt, right, it's probably easier to get other bands interested, other people involved, and to be able to land some of those bigger gigs.
Yeah, there's like, it goes a few ways. Like there's definitely like the word of mouth organic thing that happens from bands. Like I think at the end of the day, like if you make a record that sounds cool and a band hears it and I want to sound like that, that's like the driving factor for a lot of work. You know. And obviously the success of the records is the other part of it, where it's like, oh, if I take a band that's small and I do a record with them and then they're bigger, I can show like, hey, I can help grow a band, you know. So it was like there were a few records that and started to like get bigger on, and then labels started to trust me more. And then sonically I would get, you know, if I would do something a little more out of the box, some bands would hit me up, be like, I don't know what this is. This is awesome. It doesn't sound like, you know, any of the other stuff. I kind of want this. So it's like those two things would happen from time to time in my early years, and it would lead to more work. And it kind of just scaled up from that point, you know.
What would a band be like? Do you have an example of a band that kind of started with that you did a record and they slowly built and got bigger and bigger and bigger?
Yeah, I did this band Reign Supreme. They were old like Death Wish hardcore band from Philly. It was one of the first bands kind of that style that I took on at the studio. And I made a record that is like, it doesn't really sound like a traditional record did at the time for a band like that. And I think that helped the band also kind of like, the band became like kind of a thing in that world and had a lot of heat for a little while there too. So I think that one really led to a lot of like more labels being able to trust me and bands thinking I could do something that was like cool and credible. It was probably the biggest catalyst for work for me, or very early on in my career.
And was it difficult to juggle, or like, did you feel like any of those bands that you were working with, did those influences spill over into any of the stuff that you put out with Fit for an Autopsy, or is that just, you just kept those worlds completely separate?
It's funny, like I do get asked that question a lot, and it seems like it would, but it does the opposite to me. It teaches me, it like teaches me kind of what to not do with Fit for an Autopsy. Because like when you make a million records, like we make a lot of records. I'm constantly, aside from just like producing and mixing a ton of outside stuff, like we just hear a lot of music and spend time with a lot of people, and you can kind of see where trends are going a little earlier on and what's starting to get a little repetitive, or like who's trying to copy what. And it kind of steers me away from like things to avoid. Like, I've heard this lyric a few too many times. This part I've heard on a few records. Like, I don't know. With Fit, I like to try to come up with stuff that feels like creatively fulfilling to me first. You know, I think the whole purpose of the band is to just be able to, like, we've been lucky where we're kind of able to just do whatever the hell we want with our music, and people seem to like it, which is cool, you know. So once that stuff gets into my brain, where I'm starting to hear people copying other things and things being a little repetitive, like, it's sort of a turnoff for me when I go to sit down to write music, because I'm not really interested in doing what other people are doing. Not that we've reinvented any kind of wheel with our band, but it just keeps me in my own lane. if that makes sense.
Right. No, it totally does. You can kind of hear and see what other people are doing. And if it's crossing over and you're like, oh, well, this band and this band and this band are all kind of doing this, maybe I should try to do a
Yeah,
separate
exactly.
thing.
I'm not like, I mean, obviously I can take some cues from some of the really good, I've definitely spoiled with the talent level of people that have come through the studio. So
Right.
there are players that are way beyond my ability where I'll hear the occasional thing and I'm like, I would have never thought of that. That's awesome. Now I'm going to think about that, you know? So like,
Yeah.
I'm sure they work their way into my brain. But it's never like, it's very rare that I'm writing and I'm like, what did that band do that I worked with? That's like not how I make music, you know?
Right. When did you start Graphic Nature?
Me and Machine had shared a studio for about maybe 4 or 5 years. And then we wound up splitting. He moved to Texas and, you know, it was always the Machine shop. So that was like his brand. And I was like, yeah, it's probably just time for us to start our own thing. So we started it maybe like at this point, it would be like 7 or 8 years ago.
Wow.
Where I was like, yeah, I just want my own identity. We were getting confused all the time, which I'm sure was frustrating. I didn't mind, but I'm sure it was frustrating for him because at the time my output was a lot higher. I was making records like nonstop. He was doing longer, slower projects. So a lot of people were probably, oh, you did that record. It's awesome. And he's like, that was Will. That probably got annoying to him too.
Oh,
so
right.
like, all right, let's just have a different name and keep it separate so we don't get confused and things like that.
And then you just built your own studio. You had to collect gear and equipment and everything and kind of put your own thing together?
Yeah, we wound up, we wound up renovating a studio that we shared when Machine moved out to Texas. We spent a couple months, like we took over that building, we built out new control rooms, we kind of redid the place. The studio we had was a bit of like kind of a rougher warehouse setup. And I think Machine knew he was pulling out of there, so he was kind of like done working on it, you know. And I had 2 engineers that were working with me at the time where I was like, I want more rooms, I want to be able to multitask, do more stuff. So when he left for Texas, we sort of like scaled up the building a bit. We're like, let's add stuff, let's make the drum room nicer, let's, you know, make it so more bands can be here at once. And we sort of like expanded on that facility. And I had that, you know, we've had that up until January 1st of this year will be the final day in that studio.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
We just settled on a new spot where I think we're going to permanently relocate the whole thing. And it's very exciting.
Jersey?
Yeah, still in Jersey. This, we found a log cabin that is like very ideal for what we want to do with a drum room and with just like, it's just got a vibe that's a little different from the dirty city area we've been living in for a while. So, yeah, very much looking forward to making that move next year.
That's so cool. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
How did COVID and the whole lockdown affect you and your work as far as a producer?
It made it insane because it was like one of the craziest years of my life because no one could tour, so everybody made a record.
Right.
We just haven't stopped working, even like literally from the onset of it. Everyone was like, "Oh, I guess we'll start writing now," and it was just endless stream of working with bands remotely and mixing a ton of stuff. Like I had a whole bunch of international work that I couldn't do. That just turned into more mixing and more mixing. Like we were just like nonstop mixing records all year. I was still producing American bands. I was just requiring everyone to get tests and like kind of isolate while we recorded because we didn't really know what was happening from time to time, you know. So I didn't stop making records. We just did it really safe. And then the waves of mixes and things that came on top of that, it's been so crazy. It's still insane. Like I feel like I want everybody to go on tour so I can stop working. Overdue for a break here. I mean, I'm not complaining because we are very lucky that we were able to still have a job in music through COVID. I know obviously a lot of people got hit really hard by this, agents and managers and venues and, you know, bands' livelihoods being taken away from. So definitely not complaining. We were busy, but it was definitely worth it. And, you know, I definitely, I feel terrible for all the people that were impacted by it in our world.
How is it like producing over a computer screen like this? Was that the first time you had ever done that?
I've only done it a couple of times. It's cool. Like, it still works. It's not ideal. I don't think it's ideal for anyone, it's just something about being in a room with people and being able to pass a guitar back and forth, or the process feels like a little more sped up when you're in a room with somebody. But I did do some good work over the past year or two with bands on Zoom. So it's a usable tool for sure.
Sure. And you're also able to put together a whole record for Fit with an Autopsy as well. Like, you must have been working constantly.
Yeah, we chipped away at it. I definitely, because I knew we were going to have a minute to make it, it wasn't as like packed in as it usually is. We usually have a touring schedule that's pretty tight, and there are windows where the record has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It was nice this time to be like, oh, just record it when you're ready, so I spent more time going away from it and coming back and things like that. Definitely less pressure, which I think was cool, and definitely helped the record. On the lyrical side, being able to live with stuff longer was really cool. We broke it into a couple sessions. We had never done that. So way more relaxing approach to making the record than usual.
Would you say that it affected the album as far as the sound, sonically and everything? You said lyrically, but like sitting on the songs for a while and being able to kind of go back and tinker with them, did that become like something where you're like, okay, I just got to put this thing away for a bit?
Yeah, I didn't tinker once they were done. That was the thing. I think that was the difference, because I got to write more songs this time. And to me, it was like, I would sit on a song and be like, I need this idea. It's not coming to me. I'm not going to force it. I'm just going to go away from it. Once I had written what I thought was a finished song, they kind of stayed finished songs. Like, it was less after the fact second guessing. I was more like, I got this. Cool. Done. Next one. So I think the drawing out the writing process a little bit let me really find what I was looking for right off the bat.
Mm-hmm. Is that a hard skill to learn? I would imagine it's a hard skill to learn, to like not overproduce an album or like spend too much time on something. Like, does that make any sense?
You have to kind of trust your instincts. A lot of times I feel like at least for me, I feel like my first idea or intention for something is like the correct one. It's rarer that I like go back on. It's like, if I felt a certain way about it, I've already thought about it. That's probably what I think the move should be. With younger bands, I see more of that second guessing, and it's a lot more like, I don't know, we got to change this. Let's put it back how it was. I don't know, maybe change it back again. Where it's like, well, why did you write this in the first place? You wanted it to do this thing. Does it do that? There it is, man. Like I think you kind of have to go with your gut on stuff like that when you create music. And not to say you can't sit and reflect and come up with something better. I do that too. Like it's not like I don't bat 1,000 off the bat all the time, but I just like, if I know what I like. So if I get it and if I hear it and I like it, and it's done. I don't have to live in self-doubt my whole life. To me, that's not the fun part of making music or making records.
How many bands are you typically working with at a particular time? Like,
I usually have a band here like I usually make records in about a month. So once a month, there's usually a different artist here. And then on top of any outside like mixing or songwriting and stuff like that. So in a given year, we'll work with 25, 30 to 40 different, artists throughout the year.
Wow.
Give or take, obviously. But sometimes I'm in records with longer recording times and cycles, and sometimes I bang out stuff shorter, but that's like about the pace we've been keeping for a while.
Mm-hmm. And do you work, like, I saw that you did the Wage War record, the new one, Manic, right? Did you compose on the album?
I just wrote a little bit. Yeah, I had worked with Jeremy on some A Day to Remember stuff earlier, and he was working with them on some of their stuff. And I guess he was like, hey, bring Will in for one. And we just jammed out a song together. that was one of the Zoom things we did. It wound up making the record, so that's cool.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I know Cody. He lives actually right down the road from me from
Oh, great.
Wayjor. So I saw that, and I love the new record, and I noticed that you had a credit on. I was like, oh wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, I love Cody. He's super nice and easy to work with, and very, very talented guy. I think he's gonna be around for a while.
Yeah, he is a great guy.
Yeah.
And you worked on the new A Day to Remember record as well, right?
Yeah, same kind of scenario. Like just jammed on a tune or two with them, and did a little bit of writing, and kind of Jeremy had a really cool approach for the record where he was like, he would find a vibe for a song he would want, and then he would kind of put a team around it that could do that.
Oh,
like,
interesting.
I have this song that's like this, so I want to use this producer because he's good at that. So he would kind of cherry pick people, like for certain vibes or certain production styles. So I was tasked with we're gonna do a heavy song, and I love Will's heavy stuff, so I want Will on a heavy song. I was like, all right, that's fun. It's like,
that's cool. That is cool.
Still want to write a chorus, but cool. Yeah. But we, yeah. So it was fun because like I knew what they wanted right off the bat. And, Jeremy definitely has he's got a very organized, thought out vision when he gets into his studio, so it was like not a ton of second guessing, like we had just talked about. He knew what he wanted, and it was very easy for me to understand that. So, and it was cool. It's fun to work with.
Do you produce all the Fit for an Autopsy records yourself, or do you have?
I do.
Okay.
Yes, I would. I'm thinking about not doing it one of these days, but right now I've done all of it. I would love to find somebody who could get in my brain and make me do stuff cooler. I always fantasize like, man, who could do this for me? Because I love that one of these records. But I always say that, and I always want to be doing it myself. So who knows?
Is there a particular producer that you would love to have produce the record?
I can't think of anyone. That's the thing. Because there are guys I love creatively, like as songwriters, and have this like creative brain where I'm like, fuck, he's a genius. I love the way he writes stuff. But I don't love their production per se. And then there are like engineering gurus where I'm like, dude, that guy's better than me. Like I want to sound like that. But then I wouldn't entrust him making creative decisions or songwriting choices. Like I haven't found my guy yet. I think I'm my guy. You know what I mean? Like, that's why I'm like, I like what it comes out of me in the end is actually what I want. So I'm like, I'm sure someone could make a better version of me and work me through this process. I just don't know who it is. I haven't found or connected with somebody like that musically where I'm like, I give you the trust,
Right.
I would like to, though. It would be a pretty cool experience.
I was thinking you have to cherry pick people like A Day to Remember, almost like, okay, I love what you're doing as far as engineering, and I love what you're doing for production. You have to kind of
maybe
piece together something.
If we had A Day to Remember budget, maybe. But we're a small metal band, so I make do with what I can here. So.
Right on. And then do you not play it? Do you play it all live with Fit for an Autopsy, or is it all? It's
been a long time since I have. So their touring is so full time that it doesn't make a ton of sense for me to be like, I'll do these couple, So I kind of just stay out of the way because once they're in the zone and they're 100-something shows in, and it's like I'm not gonna show up and complicate it, So I like take a back seat on that now.
But you're still playing live. You said you have another project that you do some stuff with.
I'm in this band called End, which I started a few years ago with just friends from other bands that I had worked with because I wanted to do a hardcore band again and kind of do some of the stuff. It's just like paying homage to a lot of the stuff I grew up as a kid really liking, and it was a fun outlet for me. Started the same scenarios, kind of started just as fun side project with dudes in other bands, and people fortunately are into it. So we played some shows, and now we're going to be doing more. We've got a little run at the end of the year, and then we've got a whole bunch of plans to actually play shows next year. So
really,
I will do a little bit of touring next year, which is cool.
That's exciting. Are you excited to get back on the road?
I think so. I've been quarantined up here long enough at the studio. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, Will, thank you so much, man, for doing this. I really, really appreciate your time.
No problem, man. Thank you for having me. It's always
Oh.
nice. It's always flattering to hear people are interested in me. So
Yeah, man, you have an
I always
incredible
appreciate the
career.
yeah, I'm doing my best here. I'm trying.
Are you working? You talked about working on other records currently. Do you have a lot of projects going on right now?
Yeah, I'm currently finishing up a Straight from the Path record. We're on like the last day or two here before we go play these shows, and then I've got a lot of mixing and some other projects through the end of the year. Can't really talk about too much, but do have a lot of records coming out next year that we're sitting around through quarantine and stuff. Now that touring's starting, I'm excited to see it all come to life.
Very, very cool. I now want to touch back on one thing real quick before I ask you my last question, but you've worked on the Body Count records. Like, how was, I mean, meeting Ice-T, like that must have been was that a huge deal for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. I loved him as a kid, and obviously the guy needs no introduction, you know, so I was a very surreal moment the first time I met him, but he's just such a cool, normal, I mean, normal is an insane word to describe him, but he's a very earth human. He's a humble guy, fully dialed into like this world still, and he's great. He's just great to work with and have great conversations with him. He's over the years he's definitely become like this figure in my life where it's like a talking point thing, but he's just such a normal, cool dude. He's a pleasure.
Sure. Yeah, because his acting career really took over. I mean, with Law and Order and everything else, but that's cool that he's was still putting records out. I remember when he announced that he was doing Body Count. That was like such a cool thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, like he just enjoys making music. Like that's where we find this connection, because it's like the guy doesn't need to do records anymore. Like his movie and television career and stuff, like he's just passionate about it. It's what he wants to do. He says what he wants. He writes the kind of music he wants. It's like it's the dream artist to work with in that sense.
Yeah, he does not care. I mean, it shows with his first, major hit.
He doesn't care about what people think about him at all, and it's beautiful.
That's so amazing. So amazing. Well, I have one more question. I want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
It's a good one. I think you have to do it. Like because I get asked all the time about how do I get good at recording and stuff. Like there's no like shortcut anymore. I don't know if there ever was, but it's like you have to put the work in. You have to fail for yourself and learn from your mistakes, and you don't get to skip a step in this world. You have to actually be the real deal if people are going to take you seriously and you're going to make it. So just keep doing it, keep writing music, keep trying new things. Like if you're in a position with people who aren't motivating you, get out of it and find one where they will. There's no other way around this than you just have to do it all the time.